Welcome to the webinar on utilizing students' interest to teach social skills. Before we introduce the speaker, I want to take just a moment to tell you about a few of the upcoming events and programs we have here at the Johnson Center. I know many of you are listening in from far away and may not be able to attend local events or programs. That's one of the main reasons why we provide this webinar series. Parents and professionals alike can register for any of our free webinars and have access to very helpful topics and experienced presenters. We host multiple webinars per month, so please visit our website at www.johnson-center.org to view the current 2016 schedule. We are adding more exciting webinars to this year's series, so if you're not on our email list, I encourage you to visit our website and click on the Join Our Email List link that appears on the homepage. To get instant news and events from the Johnson Center, including announcements for upcoming webinars, you may also follow us on Facebook and Twitter, as we often announce grant and scholarship opportunities, research opportunities, and last-minute events and presentations there. You can find links for these on our website as well. We do have a couple of exciting events coming up here in Austin. Our wonderful SIB Camp program is hosting several summer camps this year. Siblings ages 8 to 16 will have an amazing time while learning leadership skills and earning service hours. We will also be hosting 2 social skills camps this summer for kids ages 6 to 16. For more information on these camps, please contact our Family Care Coordinator, Gina Hill. Contact information can be found on our website. As you all know, April is Autism Awareness Month. One way to get involved is to take the pledge to support the autism community in meaningful and productive ways. The pledge, along with additional resources, can be found at www.takeactionforautism.org. Another way to support programs for people with autism and their families is to check out the Action for Autism auction, with lots of great items provided by over 125 Austin area businesses, restaurants, and shops. Bid on concert tickets, signed memorabilia, wine tastings, and much more. All proceeds will be used to provide summer programs for children with autism and their siblings. The auction goes live tomorrow morning, so check it out. You can find the link at takeactionforautism.org. Be sure to follow our colleagues at the Autism Research Institute, as they host their own webinar initiative and they share some great resources on their website and social media pages. Now, before we begin our presentation, please note that questions may be typed into your control panel throughout the presentation, and time permitting, they'll be addressed during the presentation. Also, for those of you that have requested copies of this presentation, we don't send out presentation slides, but we do post recordings of all our free webinars on the Johnson Center YouTube channel. Search for us on YouTube and subscribe to get full access to all of our recorded webinars. Additional resources and information will also be available on our blog, found on our website at johnson-center.org. We are offering certificates of attendance for this webinar, and a link to complete a short quiz will be emailed to you following the presentation. Today's webinar is being presented by Tami. Amanda holds a master's degree in counseling psychology and completed a recertification program in applied behavior analysis. In addition to being a board-certified behavior analyst, Amanda is a licensed professional counselor. She has experience working with both children and adults on the autism spectrum and other pervasive developmental disorders as both an ABA provider and a counselor. Since 2013, Amanda has shared her experience and knowledge within the Johnson Center's Behavioral Services program, giving her the opportunity to pursue her passion of helping children and their families. She provides ABA supervision, school support, and counseling services to people with developmental issues and their family members, and is a valued member of the Johnson Center family. Now please welcome today's presenter, Tami.
Thank you, Anissa, and thank you everyone for being here today. I'm looking forward to covering teaching for generalization using students' interests to help teach social skills. As Anissa said, you're welcome to type any questions into your text box. We'll have a few minutes at the end for questions. While I'm not able to provide any information or answers to very case-specific questions, I'm happy to provide answers to any general questions about the information I'm presenting today. So let's get started. For the typical person, a friendly social interaction is a simple act that doesn't really require much thought or preparation. This cartoon illustrates what that same exchange might be like for someone with autism. All of the processes required to understand the information being communicated just don't come so naturally. So you can see that person 1 says, "Hi, how are you?" And person 2 in response reminds himself, maintain eye contact, interpret body language, interpret facial expressions. What's he doing with his hand? while at the same time thinking, I feel uncomfortable when people look at me, I'm nervous, the little noises I make help me feel calm, I don't know what to say next, I don't understand what they're saying, do I have the script for this? What am I supposed to say? Is there an appropriate response? Is this good or bad? And eventually he gets to, I like trains, I'm comfortable talking about trains. So the verbal response he gives is, the maglev train in Shanghai is the fastest train in the world. To which person one says, huh? So you can see that not only is he consciously thinking about all of the things that he has to do to interpret what the other person is saying and remind himself what he's supposed to do, but his thoughts are also all over the place. While clinically we know that social challenges are characteristic of autism, they're more than just one of the diagnostic criteria. Individuals who have autism live in a different and complicated social world, and this affects them in real-life ways. A girl is struggling to understand nonverbal cues. She gets an autism diagnosis and sees on her neuropsych evaluation, her literal thinking suggests impairments in pragmatic language. But to her, her experience is, my friends say I can't take a hint. A young man who unintentionally repels and pushes people away, who he wants to get to know or has things in common with, has a problem that a clinician describes as rigidity and deficits in theory of mind lead to intense disagreements and difficulty making new connections. But to him, the problem is that every time I have a friend that's trying to introduce me to a group of his friends, I always end up getting into an argument and I end up freaking out and verbally assaulting someone or even a group. A girl who takes people at their word struggles to integrate the context, and nonverbal messages that they send, along with the actual verbal words that they use. This leads to a lot of confusion and miscommunication. The clinician might say, due to her inability to read body language and other social cues, she misses important information being communicated. To her, her experience is, people are so hard to understand, why don't they just say what they mean? And finally, like many people with autism, this person has no interest in small talk or faking interest in something he doesn't really care about. Although this can push others away and kind of limit his contact pool, he can't bring himself to pretend he cares when he doesn't. The clinician says, restricted interest and challenges taking others' perspectives limits his conversational abilities. This person just questions, why is it that I'm expected to hold a conversation with other people about what they're interested in, but they don't show any interest in what I like and don't maintain a conversation with me about my interests? Social challenges include both behavior excesses and behavior deficits. If you're familiar with ABA, you know that behavior excesses are behaviors that occur more than we want them to, and behavior deficits are behaviors that don't happen enough. Often when we're thinking about teaching social skills, we think of the skills that a child doesn't have, or think about the things that they're not doing effectively, like, oh, they're not making eye contact, they're not reading the nonverbal signals, and that often is true. That is an essential area that we need to be teaching, but we also need to consider the behavior excesses and teach students how to decrease those. Examples of excesses include things like odd or repetitive behaviors, talking too much, interrupting when someone else is talking, being too rigid or overly focused on the rules. You might know a student who is a rule police and talking about only a few topics that are of particular interest. Behavior deficits include withdrawing to the point that there's very little social interaction, difficulty maintaining interest or attention during social exchange, inflexibility in the group topics or goals, lack of understanding of nonverbal cues, and an inability to understand non-literal terms. It is critical that we not confuse a lack of skills or avoidance of social interaction with a lack of interest or a lack of desire for social interaction. Often students with autism want to have friends and want to interact socially with their peers, but these behavior excesses and deficits just keep them from doing so successfully. It's not that they don't want to, it's that there's some barrier there that keeps them from being able to do it. On top of that, autism is correlated with high rates of anxiety. The Johnson Center will be doing a webinar later this year covering the relationship between autism and anxiety, so be sure to check that out. But for now, I'll just say that levels of social anxiety can be especially high for anyone who has social challenges or anyone who has experienced a lot of perceived social failures. This can turn into a cycle with anxiety exacerbating any delayed skills, and that in turn making those skills even harder to perform. Then once we've performed poorly, now we've made anxiety worse. So we get caught in this cycle of anxiety affecting performance, affecting anxiety. One individual with autism said, quote, "It doesn't seem to make sense that social anxiety would make me talk more, but it's a real problem that's virtually ruining my life," unquote. How many of us talk more or get really chatty when we're nervous? Probably a lot of us, but a lot of us can read the cues and know when to stop, or can see how others are responding, use other methods to either cope with anxiety or to interact differently socially, whereas a person with autism might not be able to do that. Also contributing to the social challenges of people with autism is the unpredictable nature of social interactions. The number one issue that I hear from the clients who I work with when they describe their social challenges is fear of the unknown. In any friendly, non-business-like interaction, there's no agreement about the purpose of that interaction. And in a business type of interaction, you know why you're there. Both parties know why you're there and why you're having this interaction. So, for example, if you're checking out at a grocery store, you know why you and the cashier are having this exchange. It's because you are trying to purchase an item and they are trying to take your money in exchange for that item. There's a mutually agreed upon goal to that interaction. But in a purely social, friendly interaction, there's not that mutually agreed upon goal. So what if I'm more interested in talking to this person than they are to me? How am I going to know that I'm more interested than them? How do I know if they don't want to talk to me anymore? In addition, there's no guarantee about how the other person's going to respond. So while we might have a script in mind for how to deal with any given situation, if the other person doesn't follow that same script, am I going to know what to do? It's just unpredictable, and some people, that can be really scary for some people. The unpredictable and stimulating environment can also make things worse. For example, I have one person who I work with who describes that in environments with a lot of noise, including the noise or the sound of other people's voices, just other people in the room talking around him, makes it really hard for him to concentrate on what another person says, and makes it hard for him to concentrate on his own thoughts to figure out what to say next. And noise is just one example. There can be lots of aspects of the environment that can be stimulating. Excuse me. All of these changes can lead to avoidance of social interaction, and that avoidance combined with the skills deficits or inability to perform skills all lead to a lack of effective practice. This makes social mistakes and social deficits more clear and can make the fear of failure even greater, We need opportunities to practice these social skills so that we can get better at them. If we're avoiding those opportunities to practice or just aren't practicing effectively, if we're not using the skills that we have or are learning in an effective way, we're not going to be able to improve. So today we're going to talk about some of the effective ways to teach social skills, taking these added difficulties into consideration as well. We'll cover some research on social skills programs. I'll give you some methods for teaching a student at their current level, and I'll provide some examples of how to incorporate your students' interests into your instruction. We'll wrap up with some time for questions. So let's start with some research. Please note that this graph is a generalized representation of the information. It's not showing exact numbers or data from the studies that I'm referencing. It's just a graphic display of the general information. Research suggests that social skills interventions delivered by clinicians are effective for teaching new skills, but they're not effective in promoting generalization of those skills, meaning classroom-based or one-on-one social skills training from a teacher or an ABA therapist or a speech therapist or whomever can result in a student knowing more and having more information about social skills, but they aren't then using those skills in their real-life experiences. So they're not translating into use. The most effective programs incorporate between-session homework to practice a new skill, individual intervention focusing specifically on generalization and maintenance of those skills, or integration of the instruction into a natural environment, or some combination of all of these. We're going to talk more about integrating instruction into natural environments later in this presentation. But first, it's important that we remember that even with effective instruction and increased competence in these social skills, socializing might never be easy. It just doesn't come naturally to everyone, and that's okay. Just like math or spelling might not come naturally to other people, social skills just might not come naturally to some of our students. It's important that students learn social skills. For most people, not just people with autism, but most everyone, they need some sort of social skills to be able to get their needs met and to reach their full potential in their lives. But it might be unrealistic to expect that socializing will become easy or second nature for all the students we work with. It's not to say they can't learn, it just might not be easy for them. So let's move on to some teaching suggestions. If there's a skills deficit or an area of challenge for a student, there's a gap between where the student is now and where we want them to be. With social skills, I often see parents and teachers and others working with a student, prompting a student to do the behavior that is the end goal. And this can seem intuitive. We prompt a student to do the behavior that we want to see them doing. But often this is far too big of a step for the child to do independently, considering where they are right now. So we can prompt them all we want to do this behavior, but if they're not able to do it when we're not there to prompt them, they're not really learning it. So instead, we need to step back and look at how we can shape the behavior over time. This includes both verbal and nonverbal behaviors. So we add to the student's current repertoire gradually to move closer and closer to that end goal and teach those in-between steps. So for example, maybe we want a student to learn to show interest and converse about non-preferred topics. That's a really great goal. but the student needs to learn some skills in between to get to the point where he can do that. Maybe for this student, we are first going to teach reciprocating. So when in an exchange, when one person says something, another person responds, and we have this back and forth. And this is a key component in all interactions. So instead of jumping to teaching him or prompting him to respond to non-preferred topics, I'm instead going to engage him on his terms and his interests. Don't just expect him to engage in mine, talk about what I want to talk about. He might not be able to do that yet. So instead, I'm using what he does like to talk about to teach this concept of reciprocity. As you're looking at ways to teach social development, focus on areas that are interesting for your student and areas where the student already feels comfortable and competent. If you're using activities that require complex language or fine motor skills, or if you're in really stimulating environments, anything that creates challenges for your individual student, this experience of trying to learn a social skill is going to be really overwhelming, and you're kind of setting up the child to fail. So think about the areas where your child or your student succeeds. What do they do well? What do they like to do? And celebrate those strengths. Use them to your advantage. A student with autism might have really amazing rote memorization skills. Maybe they have an ear for music or artistic abilities. How can you take what they actually like and are really good at and use that to motivate interest in social interaction? How can you take those things that they like and use those as an opportunity for the student to be the leader or show off their competency? Once you're at the point where you're teaching a student social games or cooperative play or goals related to teamwork, consider how you can make an activity more appealing to a student by incorporating those students' interests or preferred topics into that same activity. What is going to make this activity that is social in nature, that has lots of social reinforcement for other kids, how can you make that more engaging for your particular student? So in this example, we put pictures of Big Hero 6 on the Jenga blocks. And this kiddo loves Big Hero 6, so he's willing to engage in the game for longer periods when there's something of interest on the blocks. He doesn't get the same reinforcement that other kids do out of just playing the game or just the interaction with the other kids. So instead, we made the blocks themselves reinforcing so that he would be willing to play longer and be able to practice those skills longer. Similarly, maybe your student isn't the least bit interested in sports, but he does like numbers. So instead of requiring him to play basketball after school with his peers, he can be involved in the basketball game by becoming the scorekeeper or the statistician for the game. Now he's interested in the game, he has opportunities to interact with his peers, but in a way that's more comfortable for him by doing something that he actually likes to do. Another example might be that if you're working with someone who is great with statistics or particularly sports statistics, teach them how to play fantasy football. You're giving them an opportunity to engage and to relate with their peers, but in a way that makes sense to them and feels more comfortable to them, taking those added challenges out. So now I'm going to share some treatment examples and strategies for teaching in natural settings. My-Lu therapy is a concept in the psychotherapy field in which therapy is provided in an environment that is similar to a patient's natural environment, but the environment is manipulated in a way that allows the patient to learn skills for coping and reduces the threats that might be in their typical normal environment. An extension of this is the natural environment teaching, or the incidental teaching that we use in ABA, when we incorporate teaching into everyday activities and play and just things that we're doing throughout the day rather than at a designated therapy time. But through My-Lu, we create an environment that's interesting and reinforcing, and this becomes the basis for more elaborate communicative responses. The goal is to make the natural environment more reinforcing, to reduce the need for planted or external reinforcers. If we can make an activity or an environment more reinforcing in and of itself, it's much easier to generalize, to not need to give reinforcement on a set schedule. Teaching social skills in natural settings or natural environments does lead to increased generalization. The more similar we can make a teaching setting to the real life setting where they're going to use these skills, the better. If the group facilitator can create an environment and a group that feels safe, that student then has some protection from social anxiety. Students have the opportunity to practice skills in a natural environment, but with a safe and supportive group and safe and supportive facilitator. And they can practice healthy risk-taking and receive some constructive feedback from their peers, which, by the way, is often far more valuable than any feedback they would receive from their parents or their teachers. If an adult says it, it means nothing, but when their peers, someone their age, says the exact same thing, now they believe it. So this feedback can also help students understand that there will be success and room for improvement in everything they do. No one is good at everything. No one is good at every aspect of everything. And although they can't always control what they don't know or what skills they don't have or what they're not able to do successfully, they can still control their reactions, they can fix their mistakes, and they can learn more for next time. My-Lu teaching builds on incidental teaching that's common in ABA. So we start just as we would with incidental teaching by structuring the environment. This takes some of the unpredictability out that can be so overwhelming to some students. So do things like set ground rules, talk about behavioral expectations for the group, put up visuals for those behavioral expectations if you can. Use a visual schedule, or if you're not using a visual schedule, at least have a schedule that you communicate to the class so everyone knows what is going to happen, what we're going to do next, how long are we going to do this. Everyone knows what to expect. Make the environment as consistent and predictable as possible. Then use modeling to build new skills. This is language skills, conversational skills, social skills, whatever area you're teaching right now, model using those skills. From a lot of students don't pick up on a new skill spontaneously. It has to be pointed out to them and say, this is what I'm doing. So maybe in this particular group, you're working on coming up with new conversation topics. So maybe you model how to look around the room and find something in the room that you can comment on to start a conversation when there's a delay in conversation, or when there's a gap in the conversation. You might have to model the skill and then say, did you see what I did there? I found something that we can all relate to, and that's what I found to talk about. Often, even that is not enough. The student will also need to be prompted and reinforced to use those skills. Of course, we always want to reinforce correct use of a skill to increase use of it, but depending on where your students are, what their level is right now, there are different levels of prompting, and you can choose what's going to be best, what's going to be the most appropriate level of prompt for your student. I'm going to talk about some examples of natural environment types of groups that I have led or been a part of in the past. These are platforms where you can use some of those teaching strategies, and keep in mind that these are only examples and the possibilities are endless. These are just some that I have experience with and I'm sharing. And remember that the goals of the group will depend on where your students are now. The purpose of these natural setting groups is simply to engage their interest and provide real-life settings where students can learn and use and practice their skills. So this first one I'm going to talk about is a video game group. This is not a group where students are coming to learn how to play video games or to just to play video games. They're there to learn social skills, and video games just happens to be the platform that everyone is interested in and everyone can relate to, that's going to hold their interest and allow them to practice their social skills in a comfortable way. So maybe the goal of this video gaming group is good sportsmanship, and we're working on targets like taking turns, giving compliments, giving encouragement to other players, losing graciously. It also provides an opportunity for connection with peers who share their same interests. And this, coming together with other people who share your interests, is one of the cornerstones of forming friendships that can last beyond the group. So for many people with social challenges, there's lots of people who they know. There's lots of people who go to their school, lots of people who they see every day in class, but they aren't their friends. And getting to that next level of friendship can be much more difficult. So having a group that is based around a common interest provides this thread that already links everyone together, takes some of the guesswork out for these students of figuring out who might be a possible good friend for me, who likes the same things that I do, are they interested in the games that I like. This provides kind of that avenue that they are already giving them that information without them having to figure it out. Maybe that's another skill that you want to target in the future. My next example is an exploration group. This group took turns going out to explore different areas of the city. So they might go hiking one week when they met and go to a mall or a shopping center on another day. Just being out in the community provides lots of opportunity for spontaneous communication and connection between the members of the group. It also gives them a chance to learn social etiquette and expectations for different types of settings. And simply having an activity that everyone is on board with, that everyone is doing at the same time, something as simple as hiking, really opened up the doors for so much spontaneous communication. If this same group of students were just sitting around a table talking about how to do small talk or something like that, that's much less relatable, much less natural, and just, there's less opportunity, less stimuli to start natural conversation. And so this was a really amazing group to see their growth once they were in natural settings. And of course, the group facilitator is there to help people connect with each other when they're relating on a topic, and the group facilitator is there to help them with the skills as they're needing them. But so much of it happens naturally in this type of setting. Now, can be a lot harder to do a group like this that is community-based. You have no real control over the environment. So while you can still have a schedule and set group expectations and talk about what behaviors are expected, and you should still do those things, you can't control the environment itself. So what if it rains? What if this place is closed for construction that day? There are all these factors that you can't control. So when planning a group like this, consider your students' strengths, consider their needs, as well as how much support you're going to have. If it's going to be 1 or 2 people with 10 students who might need a lot of support, maybe this isn't the best type of group to do. You'd also have to consider how you would manage transportation. So there are some practical aspects of a group like this that you would need to consider. Next, I'm going to talk about a Minecraft group. Who has kids or students who are interested in Minecraft? It is so popular these days, and there's so many ways that you can use Minecraft to teach social skills. So many different ways that you can make a group around Minecraft. Maybe it's a Minecraft strategy group where the kids are coming together and talking about what they've done in Minecraft, or talking about how they can get to their goals in Minecraft. If you have gaming systems or are doing a remote type of group, you can actually have the kids play Minecraft together and either be working toward a common goal that is predetermined before they start playing, or maybe they play a game first together all in the same world, and then you talk about the social lessons that they have encountered, like cooperation, being nice to people or being too mean to people, the give and take that they experience in the game, trust, working on group goals rather than individual goals, building alliances against bullies, maybe communication and problem solving. All of these things are just skills that are required to be successful with Minecraft. And you can use all of those skills as things that you're working on in these groups. I've heard of some providers do groups with Minecraft-based activities, not the actual game. So they're not actually getting together and playing Minecraft, but they're doing activities that involve Minecraft or Minecraft concepts to teach social skills. So they might be doing, teamwork building type stuff, or stuff like that, where they are still incorporating Minecraft but not playing the actual game. And the last example that I have for you today is a hosting group. Now this works great if you're working with adults who have their own apartments or their own place where they live, but I know that for a lot of people listening today, that's not who they're working with, and that's okay too. Also, for some people or some providers, to go to someone's apartment would be kind of a boundary violation. So depending on your setting, on where you're working, it might or might not be realistic to do something like that. If it's not, that's okay too. There's lots of other options. Maybe your students take turns hosting at community settings. Every week they choose a park or a restaurant or someplace in the community where everyone's going to meet, and they are the host that week. If you have a classroom or a facility where you meet, students can take turns hosting in that classroom. The idea would be that students just take turns hosting, and they need to do all the things that would be expected of a host. Things like sending invitations to make sure everyone knows about it by email or text or word of mouth. Making sure that their house or whatever space they're using looks presentable, is clean. Choosing activities for the guests to do or giving options for them to choose from. Maybe they provide food and drinks to share. This requires lots of planning and things like perspective taking. What are my guests going to like? What are they going to want to do? And likewise, guests need to do things like using their brain filter, being flexible with the group plan, and going along with something that maybe they don't really care about or are not interested in. Again, a group like this can require some logistical and practical planning in advance, things like budgeting, who's going to be responsible for buying all of the supplies. Does the host need to budget and buy those things? If you're also doing life skills, maybe that's a great thing to incorporate into that. But if you're not, it might not be something that you can ask students to provide more money, or you can't really require that students do something that will cost them extra. And if that's the case, are you going to provide the supplies? Or are you going to use supplies that are already at your school? How are you going to manage that? So let me just wrap up by reminding everyone that social challenges create true barriers for people with autism, whether that's at the level of being able to get their needs met, form close friendships, if people are isolated because of social anxiety. The need for social skills training in this area is real, and often that desire for interaction is there. Research suggests that clinician-delivered intervention is effective in teaching social skills, but results in little generalization. So one way that we can increase generalization is by integrating instruction into natural environments. We can do this through MyLu teaching, using strategies like structuring the environment, modeling, prompting, and reinforcing to increase new skills. These are all things that we would also use in ABA incidental teaching. I gave a few examples of of groups that I have been a part of in the past, gaming, exploration, Minecraft, and hosting groups. These are all natural setting groups, the purpose of which was to engage interest and provide real-life settings to learn the skills. The goals will always depend on your students' current levels. We need to look at where they are now and what are the steps that are going to be required to get them to where we want them to be. I have a few minutes for some questions. Also, if anyone listening today has examples of groups that they have done using these strategies, please feel free to share. So my first question is, what redirection strategy do you recommend when the child shuts down? My redirection strategy will depend on the student. If you are familiar with ABA, you know that behavior has a function, and we need to intervene when we're changing that behavior. We need to intervene in a way that addresses the function of that behavior. So why is the child shutting down? If it is a true nervous system anxiety reaction, my recommendation for handling that is to give the child time and space to calm down. And you may need to step in and do things to help the child calm down, but often when a child gets to the point where they're so overwhelmed with the social interaction that they just shut down and are no longer engaging, it's because they need time to reset, to get away from anything that's overstimulating them. So giving them the time and space to do that in whatever way works for them, and then return once they are able. The key is going to be making sure that they return to the social interaction when they're able to. Excuse me. The key is making sure that they return. Otherwise, shutdown can turn into a learned escape behavior. So making sure that they come back and pick up where they left off, or at least do some sort of social interaction once they're ready to return, is key to make sure that they don't learn, well, if I do these things, I can get out of the interaction. All right, I have another question here. It says, what do you think is the first step or thing to think about when trying to help a child with social skills issues? Well, my suggestion is the first thing to think about is where they are now. What is this child able to do? When you're looking at what am I going to teach first, you want to look at where they are right now and what is the next step I can take from there. There are lots of social skills assessments that are out there that can be really great for helping you figure out what might be a next step. Things like, if you're working with younger kids, things like the VB map or the ABLES assessments also have guidelines, or the stepping stones for, once you've mastered this target, can the child do this? Has it generalized to this behavior, or do we need to now teach this behavior separately? So in my experience, the first thing to think about when trying to help a child with social skills issues is, what can they do? Where are they successful? Also, keep in mind any long-term goals and what you want them to be able to do. But it's really important that we are teaching at the level where the student is now. Question, how do you provide reinforcement during social skills groups? That answer to that question will depend on the group and the students. So the reinforcement that you will provide will depend on what is reinforcing to your group. It might be, like I've mentioned in the presentation, when possible, incorporate reinforcing aspects or reinforcing things into activities in and of themselves. How can you make an activity more reinforcing so that you're not having to provide additional external reinforcement? Sometimes that's not always possible and doesn't work for every student that would be in your group. So what is going to be reinforcing to that student, and how can you, to multiple students, or how can you find a way to incorporate reinforcement for this one child who really needs more reinforcement? How can you incorporate more of what's reinforcing to him into the activities that you're doing? You can always have some really reinforcing activity to do at the end, or watch a video at the end once you've finished everything else that you needed to do. Those are always options. But for some of our kids, that isn't enough. That's not enough reinforcement or frequent enough reinforcement that it's really helpful. What is the peers model for social skills? Information on their website says it's the only evidence-based model out there. Thoughts? I personally really like the social skills model, or the peers model. They incorporate between session homework that does help with generalization. They also include a parent training component, so parents can help their kids outside of the group to use the skills that they're learning. So I personally really like the peers model. For a long time, it was the only evidence-based model out there. I believe that now there are some other social skills curricula that have more evidence behind them. It's my understanding that the peers model still has the most evidence behind it, but it's not. Now there are others that are gaining more evidence to show that they work, or what aspects of them are most helpful. As a parent, how should I help my young adult initiate an interest-based group? That is a really great question, and a really great idea. That how can you help your child be the one to start this group rather than a teacher or a parent putting this group together? How can you help your child put this group together? So that's a really great idea. Again, as the parent of this child, this young adult, I should say, you'll want to look at where they are now, what aspects of planning and organizing and initiating this group, what aspects is this person capable of doing, and build from there. So often the planning stages of the group are the most difficult. So you may have to do a lot with the planning. That doesn't mean she can't be involved, and she should be involved. But you'll probably have to ask lots of guided questions, help her think through the process, all of the logistics, all of the practical aspects that you'll need to address, and using guided questions and planning strategies, help her come up with that information. Once you have an idea, once the planning is put together and you're ready to start actually carrying this out, again, what is she capable of doing? What can she do on her own? What can you assign her to say, okay, to make this group happen, I need you to do this, and allow her to do that. Maybe that's really not an option, and instead you need to prompt her through the steps. But I would encourage you to actually prompt her through the steps, so that she can learn, breaking them down into very small components if needed, so that she's learning not only the end goal of this is what we need to do, but learning how to do that and why to do that in the process. How do you determine when it's a question of ability versus motivation? This is another one that really depends on the student, on the child, and it's a very important question. Is it ability? Is it that the child doesn't have the skills to do what I'm asking him to do? Or is it that he doesn't want to? Or is it that there's some other barrier like anxiety that might be preventing him from using the skills that he has? When determining that, I look at whether or not the skill is ever there. Does he do the skill when there's something really reinforcing that is motivating him to do it? Does he do the skill in other settings or with other people or at other times that he might need it? If so, then I would look at whether there's enough reinforcement at the time that I'm wanting him to do it. If not, I would assume that it's a lack of skills, that the skills are not there to be able to do what I'm asking him to do. And that is about all the time we have, so I thank you so much for your questions. Please check out our archived webinars on YouTube. All of the Johnson Center's past webinars are on our YouTube channel. We also have Facebook and Twitter. You can follow us there to see about upcoming webinars and any other programs that we have going on. We'll have posted on Facebook and Twitter. And our contact information is at the bottom, info@johnson-center.org or 512-732-8400. I thank you so much for your time and attention. Thank you for sending your questions, and we will hopefully see you soon for our next webinar.